What happens when television's most outspoken moderator finally pushes her co-hosts too far? You won't believe what unfolds when years of simmering tensions explode into the most dramatic confrontation in the View's history. Last night's episode delivered a shocking meltdown that left viewers speechless and the show in complete chaos. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds. The tension was palpable from the moment the cameras rolled. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the head of the table with her usual air of authority, but something was different. Her co-hosts exchanged glances that spoke volumes. This wasn't going to be another ordinary day at the Hot Topics table. The trouble began when the panel started discussing the latest controversy surrounding celebrity endorsements in politics. What seemed like a standard discussion quickly revealed the deep fractures that had been building behind the scenes for months. Joy Behar attempted to lighten the mood with her characteristic humor, but even she couldn't mask the underlying tension that crackled through the studio. "I think we need to be honest about what's really happening here," Sarah Haynes said, her voice carrying an edge that caught everyone off guard. She wasn't just talking about the topic at hand. She was addressing something much deeper, something that had been festering in the group dynamic for weeks. Whoopi's response was immediate and sharp. "Excuse me, Sarah, but I think I know what we need to talk about on my show." The emphasis on "my show" didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the studio. The audience shifted uncomfortably as the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Sunny Hostin, typically diplomatic in her approach, tried to redirect the conversation. "I think what Sarah is trying to say is that we all have valuable perspectives to bring to these discussions." But her attempt at peacekeeping only seemed to irritate Whoopi further. "Oh, really?" Whoopi's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Because last I checked, I've been doing this a lot longer than most people at this table. I've earned the right to guide these conversations." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, daring anyone to contradict her. The commercial break couldn't come soon enough, but even during the pause, the tension remained thick. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled to address what was clearly becoming a volatile situation. But when they returned from break, things only got worse. The discussion had supposedly moved on to a lighter topic about holiday traditions, but the undercurrent of hostility remained. Every comment seemed loaded with double meaning. Every glance carried weight. Whoopi's responses became increasingly curt and dismissive, particularly towards Sarah and Sunny, who had dared to challenge her authority earlier. "You know what I find interesting?" Alyssa Farah Griffin interjected, her voice steady but firm, "is how some people think that experience automatically means they're always right. But sometimes fresh perspectives can be just as valuable." The studio fell silent. Everyone knew she wasn't talking about holiday traditions anymore. Whoopi's face hardened as she processed what had just been said. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed like she might explode right there. Instead, she leaned back in her chair with a cold smile. "Well, that's an interesting theory, Alyssa. But when you've been in this business as long as I have, when you've won the awards I've won, when you've built the reputation I've built, then maybe you'll understand why experience matters." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. Joy tried to jump in with a joke, but Whoopi cut her off with a wave of her hand. "No, Joy, I think it's important that everyone understands how this works. This isn't a democracy. This is television, and television has hierarchies." Sarah's face flushed red. "With all due respect, Whoopi, we're supposed to be a panel of equals here. That's what makes the show work. When one person starts acting like they're above everyone else, it creates problems." "Problems?" Whoopi's voice rose dangerously. "The only problem I see is people forgetting their place and thinking they can challenge someone who's been carrying this show for years." The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, some whispering among themselves, others sitting in stunned silence. This was clearly not the entertainment they had signed up for. But the confrontation was far from over. Sunny, who had been trying to stay neutral, finally spoke up. "Whoopi, I think we're all just trying to do our jobs here. No one is questioning your experience or your contributions. But we all have a responsibility to our viewers to present balanced discussions." "Balanced discussions?" Whoopi laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about balance? How about we talk about who actually brings the ratings to this show? How about we talk about who the network really depends on? Because I guarantee you, it's not the people who've been here for 5 minutes thinking they know everything. The verbal assault was relentless and personal. Each word was carefully chosen to wound, to establish dominance, to remind everyone exactly where they stood in her hierarchy. But what Whoopi didn't realize was that her co-hosts had finally reached their breaking point. "That's enough," Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. "We're not your employees, Whoopi. We're your colleagues. And if you can't treat us with basic respect, then maybe you need to reconsider whether this is the right job for you." The studio erupted in gasps. No one had ever spoken to Whoopi like that on live television. Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, disbelief. For a moment, it seemed like she might actually apologize, might recognize that she had gone too far. But then, her expression hardened into something cold and calculating. "You know what, Sarah? Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need to reconsider some things. But it's not my job that needs reconsidering." The threat was unmistakable. Everyone at the table knew that Whoopi had the power to influence who stayed and who went. The implication hung in the air like a sword waiting to drop, and suddenly the confrontation had escalated to a point where there might be no coming back. Joy Behar, who had been trying to stay out of the crossfire, finally couldn't hold back any longer. "Whoopi, what are you doing? This isn't you. We're supposed to be friends here." Her voice carried decades of friendship and genuine concern, but it only seemed to fuel Whoopi's anger. "Friends." Whoopi turned on Joy with a venom that shocked everyone. "Friends don't undermine each other. Friends don't sit quietly while other people try to tear down everything you've built." Her finger jabbed in the air as she spoke, each word dripping with accusation. "Nobody's trying to tear down anything." Sunny interjected, her legal training kicking in as she tried to de-escalate. "We're just trying to have a conversation about how we work together as a team." "A team?" Whoopi's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Let me tell you about teams, Sunny. Teams have leaders. Teams have people who make decisions. And teams have people who follow those decisions. What we have here is a bunch of people who think they're all captains of the ship." The audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. But the confrontation was building to a crescendo that no one could stop. Alyssa, who had been relatively quiet since her earlier comment, found her voice again. "Maybe the problem is that you see this as your ship instead of our ship. We're all invested in this show's success. We all care about what happens here." "Care?" Whoopi's voice rose to a near shout. "You want to talk about caring? I've been caring about this show since before most of you even knew what daytime television was. I've been carrying this show through ratings wars, through controversies, through changes in management. And now you're going to lecture me about caring?" Sarah, who had been visibly shaking with anger, finally exploded. "Yes, we are going to lecture you about caring. Because caring isn't just about the show's success. It's about treating the people around you with dignity. It's about recognizing that we all contribute something valuable here." "Valuable?" Whoopi's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You want to know what's valuable? Ratings are valuable. Awards are valuable. Respect is valuable. And respect is earned, not given away for free to people who walk in here thinking they deserve it." The personal attacks were becoming more vicious by the minute. Whoopi's face had flushed red, and her voice carried a cruelty that seemed to surprise even her. But she was too far gone to stop now. "You know what your problem is, Sarah?" Whoopi continued her assault. "You think because you smile pretty for the cameras and say the right things that you've earned a seat at the grown-ups table. But this isn't kindergarten. This is business. And in business, there are leaders and there are followers." "Stop it," Joy said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Just stop it right now, Whoopi. You're being cruel, and it's not okay." But Whoopi had crossed a line and seemed determined to burn every bridge in sight. "Cruel? You think I'm being cruel? Let me tell you what's cruel. It's watching people you thought you could trust turn against you. It's watching people you helped bring to this table try to push you out of your own chair. Nobody's trying to push you out of anything." Sunny's voice cracked with emotion. "We're trying to work with you, not against you. But you're making it impossible." "Impossible?" Whoopi stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a screech that seemed to echo through the studio. "You want to know what's impossible? It's trying to work with people who don't respect what you've accomplished. It's trying to lead a team that questions your every decision." The standing position gave her a psychological advantage, and she used it mercilessly. Looking down at her seated co-hosts, she continued her tirade. I've been in this business longer than some of you have been alive. I've won awards that most people can only dream of. I've built a career that spans decades. And you're going to sit there and tell me I don't know how to run my own show. It's not your show, Sarah said quietly, but her words carried tremendous weight. It's our show, all of ours. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you really should reconsider your position here. The studio fell into a deathly silence. Sarah had just said what everyone was thinking, but no one had dared to voice. The challenge was direct, personal, and unmistakable. Whoopi's face went through a series of emotions: shock, rage, hurt, and then something darker. My position. Whoopi's voice was dangerously quiet now. Let me make something very clear to all of you. I don't need to reconsider my position. I am the position. This show exists because of me. These ratings exist because of me. And if you think you can just push me aside, you're about to learn a very painful lesson about how this industry really works. The threat was no longer veiled. It was direct, personal, and loaded with the kind of power that could destroy careers. But instead of backing down, the other hosts seemed to find strength in their unity against what they saw as bullying behavior. Are you threatening us? Alyssa asked, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. Because if you are, then maybe. It's time to have a conversation with the producers about what kind of work environment this has become. Whoopi's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like panic. The mention of producers and work environment hit too close to home. She had gone too far, said too much, and now found herself in a position where her own behavior could be scrutinized. Threatening, she laughed, but the sound was hollow. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply explaining reality. This is television. This is business. And in business, there are consequences for insubordination. Insubordination. Joy's voice carried disbelief. Whoopi, listen to yourself. We're not your employees. We're your colleagues. We're supposed to be your friends. But Whoopi was beyond reason now. The confrontation had taken on a life of its own, and she seemed determined to see it through to its bitter conclusion. Her next words would push the situation past any possible point of return. You know what? Whoopi's voice dropped to a menacing whisper that somehow carried more threat than any shout. I'm tired of pretending that we're all equal here. I'm tired of pretending that your opinions matter as much as mine. I'm tired of pretending that this show would survive without me. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the production crew seemed to hold their breath as Whoopi continued her devastating monologue. Sarah, you think you're so smart with your little comments about respect and dignity? Let me tell you something about respect. It's earned through decades of hard work, not handed out like participation trophies. And dignity? Real dignity comes from knowing your place and staying in it. Sarah's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. My place? Are you seriously going to stand there and tell me what my place is? I've worked just as hard as anyone at this table to get where I am. Have you? Whoopi's laugh was cruel. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been handed everything on a silver platter. You waltz in here with your perfect smile and your scripted responses, and you think that makes you qualified to sit at this table with people who've actually earned their stripes. The attack was so personal, so vicious, that even Joy recoiled. Whoopi, that's completely out of line. Sarah has every right to be here, and you know it. Do I? Whoopi turned her fury on Joy, her oldest friend and ally. Because lately, Joy, I'm not sure what I know anymore. I thought I knew who my friends were. I thought I knew who had my back. But apparently, I was wrong about a lot of things. The betrayal in her voice was real, but it was twisted by her own sense of entitlement. She genuinely believed that any disagreement with her was a personal attack. Any challenge to her authority was an act of treachery. This is insane, Sunny said, her legal training helping her maintain composure even as the situation spiraled completely out of control. Whoopi, you're talking about us like we're enemies. We're not enemies. We're colleagues who are trying to work together. Colleagues. Whoopi's voice cracked with bitter laughter. Colleagues don't conspire against each other. Colleagues don't gang up on each other. Colleagues don't try to undermine each other's authority on live television. Nobody's conspiring against you, Alyssa said firmly. We're responding to your behavior. There's a difference. My behavior. Whoopi's voice rose to a shriek. My behavior is the behavior of someone who's been disrespected and undermined by people she thought she could trust. My behavior is the behavior of someone who's been pushed too far by people who don't know when to stop. The audience was visibly uncomfortable now. Some people were whispering to each other, others were looking around nervously, and a few had actually started to leave. This was no longer entertainment. It was a public meltdown of epic proportions. "Whoopi, please." Joy tried one more time, her voice breaking with emotion. "This isn't you. This isn't who you are. We've been friends for decades. Don't let this destroy everything we've built together." For a moment, Whoopi's expression softened slightly. There was a flicker of recognition, a glimpse of the person her friends knew and loved. But it was quickly replaced by something harder, more bitter. "Everything we've built." Whoopi's voice was now dripping with disdain. "Joy, let's be honest about what we've built. I built a career. I built a reputation. I built this show. And you all came along for the ride. But somewhere along the way, you forgot who was driving the bus." That was the final straw. Sarah stood up from her chair, her face flushed with anger and hurt. "You know what, Whoopi? If this is who you really are, if this is how you really feel about us, then maybe we should all reconsider whether we want to be on this ride at all." "Maybe you should," Whoopi shot back without hesitation. "Because I'm getting really tired of carrying dead weight." The words hung in the air like a slap. Every person at that table had contributed to the show's success, had brought their own talents and perspectives, had helped build the audience and the ratings. To dismiss them as dead weight was not just insulting, it was delusional. Sunny stood up next, her movements deliberate and dignified. "I think we've heard enough. Whoopi, you've made your feelings about us very clear. But let me make something clear to you. We're not going anywhere. This show belongs to all of us, and we're going to continue doing our jobs with or without your approval." "With or without me, you mean?" Whoopi said, her voice now carrying a dangerous edge. "Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You want me gone. You want to push me out so you can take over." "Nobody wants you gone," Joy said desperately. "We want you to be the person we know you can be. We want you to treat us with the same respect we've always shown you." "Respect?" Whoopi laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about respect? Here's some respect for you. I'm done. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with this fake friendship, and I'm done with this whole charade." She reached for her earpiece and yanked it out with a sharp motion that sent feedback screeching through the studio. The technical crew scrambled to fix the audio issue, but Whoopi was already moving. "You know what?" she said, her voice now carrying clearly through the studio without amplification. "You all think you can do this show without me? You think you're so talented and so important? Well, let's find out." She grabbed her papers from the table and clutched them to her chest like a shield. Her movements were jerky and aggressive, fueled by rage and wounded pride. "Whoopi, don't do this," Alyssa said, but her voice carried no hope that her words would make any difference. "Do what?" Whoopi spun around to face the table one last time. "Leave? Walk away from people who don't appreciate what I've done for them? Maybe that's exactly what I should do." The remaining hosts watched in stunned silence as Whoopi turned her back on them and began walking toward the edge of the set. Her heels clicked against the floor with sharp, angry sounds that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent studio. "Whoopi," Joy called after her, but Whoopi didn't turn around. She didn't acknowledge the call. She just kept walking, her back straight and her head held high. Even as her world crumbled around her, the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the dramatic exit. The audience sat in shocked silence, unsure whether to applaud or sit quietly. The production crew stood frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep broadcasting the unprecedented meltdown. As Whoopi reached the edge of the set, she paused for just a moment. For a brief second, it seemed like she might turn around, might reconsider, might try to salvage what was left of her relationships and her reputation. But instead, she kept walking. She walked past the cameras, past the stunned crew members, past the producers who were frantically trying to figure out what to do next. She walked out of the studio and into the hallway, leaving behind a show in chaos and colleagues in shock. The remaining hosts sat in stunned silence for several long moments. Joy was openly crying, her makeup running down her cheeks. Sarah looked shell-shocked, still processing what had just happened. Sunny and Alyssa exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the enormity of what they had just witnessed. Finally, Joy pulled herself together enough to speak. "We're going to take a break," she said, her voice shaking. "We'll be right back." But everyone in that studio knew that when they came back, everything would be different. The show would go on, but it would never be quite the same. The confrontation had changed everything, and there was no going back to the way things were before. As the cameras finally stopped rolling and the audience began to file out in confused whispers, the remaining hosts sat at the table in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The woman who had dominated the show for so long was gone, and they were left to pick up the pieces of a broadcast that would be remembered as one of the most dramatic moments in television history.